Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Rain pelted the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office on the 32nd floor, and I was drowning in manuscripts that all read like carbon copies of each other. Romance. Novels where the biggest conflict was choosing between two identical rich men. Thrillers where the only surprise was how predictable they were. Then Harper's manuscript landed on my desk. The cover letter was handwritten, who does that anymore, on coffee-stained paper. No agent, no fancy letterhead. Just a scrawled note. This is my story. Take it or leave it. I almost left it. But something about those first few lines grabbed me by the throat. The prose was rough, unpolished, like it had been carved out with broken glass rather than written. It told the story of a woman fighting her way through underground boxing rings to pay for college, sleeping on friends' couches, eating ramen for weeks just to afford textbooks. It was raw and honest and bleeding with truth. I called her that same afternoon. Her voice was husky, like she'd been shouting or smoking or both. Kennedy Phillips. The Phillips Publishing Kennedy Phillips? That's me. She laughed, low and cynical. What's a princess want with my story, princess? I bristled, but something in her tone made me pause. You're writing. It's shit? Alive, I finished. When can you come in? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, tomorrow. But I'm not changing anything to make it pretty for your readers. I wouldn't ask you to. Another pause. Then softer. We'll see. Harper Reeves walked into my office like she owned it, which was impressive considering she was wearing ripped jeans and a leather jacket that had seen better decades. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there was a small scar through her left eyebrow that caught the light when she moved. She was nothing like the authors I usually worked with, no desperate eagerness, no fawning gratitude. She slumped into the chair across from my desk like she was doing me a favor by being there. So, she said, eyes scanning my diplomas, my awards, the family photo where I'm shaking hands with some senator. Nice setup you got here. Thank you. I kept my voice professional, but something about her presence made the air feel electric. Your manuscript is rough around the edges, I know. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. But it's real. Every word of it. I studied her face, sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes that seemed to see right through all my carefully constructed walls. The fight scenes are incredible. How did you research them so thoroughly? She smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Research? That's when I noticed her knuckles. Scarred and slightly swollen, like she'd been punching things recently. Hard things. Our first editing session ran until midnight. Harper had opinions about everything: comma placement, character motivation, the way I'd suggested softening a particularly brutal scene. We argued about semicolons for 20 minutes. It should have been tedious, but instead, I found myself more engaged than I'd been in years. You're not like what I expected, she said as we finally called it quits. What did you expect? Uptight rich girl who wouldn't understand a real story if it bit her on her perfectly manicured ass. I looked down at my hands, nails painted in a subtle nude, cuticles perfect. And now? She gathered her papers, shoving them into a beat-up messenger bag. Jury still out. That there was something in her eyes when she said it, something that made my pulse quicken. The editing sessions became a routine. 3 nights a week, Harper would show up at my office around 8, armed with coffee that could strip paint and opinions that could cut glass. We'd work until the cleaning crew started giving us pointed looks, then sometimes continue at the all-night diner down the street. I learned things about her in fragments. She'd grown up in foster care, put herself through college on a combination of scholarships, loans, and night jobs. She was 2 courses away from a master's degree in literature when her funding fell through. Why fighting? I asked one night, watching her flex her fingers after a particularly intense round of revisions. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, because I'm good at it. And because sometimes you need to hurt something before it hurts you. Something in her voice made me want to reach across the table, but I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup instead. The next week, she surprised me. "Come with me," she said as we were packing up. "Where?" "Gym. You want to understand the story? You need to understand the world." The gym was nothing like my pristine fitness club uptown. It was all concrete floors and exposed pipes, the air thick with sweat and determination. Harper changed into workout gear that showed off arms corded with lean muscle and scars I'd only imagined from her writing. She taught me to wrap my hands. First, her fingers gentle against my wrists as she wound the tape. Her touch sent electricity up my arms, and I had to concentrate on breathing normally. "Basic stance," she said, positioning herself in front of a heavy bag. Left foot forward, hands up. I tried to mirror her posture, feeling awkward and exposed in my designer workout clothes. "No, like this." She moved behind me, her hands covering mine to adjust my guard. Her body pressed against my back, and suddenly the room felt 20 degrees hotter. "Now," she said, her breath warm against my ear, "throw across." I punched the bag, pathetically. Harder. I tried again. "Kennedy." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "What are you afraid of?" The question caught me off guard. I was afraid of everything, of not being good enough, of disappointing my father, of never living up to the Phillips name. But mostly, standing there with Harper's hands on mine, I was afraid of how much I wanted her. I threw the punch with everything I had. The bag swung back, and Harper's hands tightened on mine. "Better," she said, but she didn't step away. We stayed like that for a heartbeat too long, her chest rising and falling against my back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then someone dropped weights on the other side of the gym, and we sprang apart like we'd been burned. "You're a fast learner," Harper said, but her voice was rougher than usual. The space between us felt charged, dangerous. I wanted to close the distance, wanted to taste the salt on her neck, wanted to find out if her skin was as soft as it looked. Instead, I cleared my throat and said, "Should we work on chapter 12? Her smile was sharp enough to cut. "Yeah, let's work." I should have known Harper was hiding something. The way she'd disappear for days at a time. The fresh bruises she'd try to cover with concealer. The fact that she always had cash when her bank account should have been empty. But I was so caught up in the intoxicating push and pull between us that I didn't ask the right questions. The truth hit me like a freight train on a Thursday night in March. I'd been trying to reach Harper all week. We had a deadline approaching, and she'd missed 2 editing sessions without explanation. Finally, I got a text with an address and the words, "If you want to understand the story, come find me." The address led to a warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions. I could hear shouting and music thumping through the concrete walls. Inside was chaos. A makeshift ring had been set up in the center of the space, surrounded by a crowd of people who looked like they'd crawled out of a noir novel. Money changed hands rapidly, and everyone was shouting at the 2 women circling each other in the ring. One of them was Harper. She moved like liquid violence, dodging a punch that would have taken my head off, then landing a combination that sent her opponent staggering. Blood trickled from a split in Harper's lip, and her sports bra was soaked with sweat, but her eyes were bright with something wild and fierce. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't research. This wasn't fiction. This was Harper's life, raw and dangerous, and completely real. She caught sight of me in the crowd and faltered for just a second. It was enough. Her opponent landed a solid hit to her ribs, and Harper went down. The crowd roared. Money changed hands, and I pushed through the chaos toward the ring like my life depended on it. Harper was already back on her feet by the time I reached her, accepting congratulations and cash from a man who looked like he could bench press a truck. When she saw me approaching, her expression shuddered. "Kennedy, we need to talk." She nodded toward a door marked private. I followed her into what might have been an office once upon a time, now furnished with a folding chair and a card table. "How long?" I asked. She was peeling off her hand wraps, not meeting my eyes. "How long what?" "How long have you been doing this?" 3 years, maybe 4. She finally looked at me, chin raised defiantly. "Since my funding got cut?" "Harper, you could get killed." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Could get killed working minimum wage too. At least this way I make rent." The casual way she said it made my chest tight. "Let me help you." "Help me what?" "Get a nice safe job answering phones. Move into some suburb where the biggest danger is running out of oat milk." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You don't get it, Kennedy. This isn't a story you can edit into something pretty. This is my life. I know that. Do you?" She was close enough now that I could smell her sweat, see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "You think you can just throw money at my problems and make them disappear?" I think I started, but she cut me off. "What? What do you think? That I'm some project you can fix? Some rough draft you can polish up?" The accusation stung because part of it was true. I had been trying to fix her, to make her life match the safe, predictable world I understood. "No," I said quietly. "I think you're extraordinary. And I think you deserve better than bleeding for money in warehouses." Something flickered in her expression. "And what's in it for you?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I could lie, give her some noble speech about helping fellow writers or social justice. But Harper had taught me about truth, about the power of raw honesty. "You," I said simply. She stared at me for a heartbeat, then she kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and hungry, tasting of blood and sweat and 3 months of wanting. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I pressed her back against the concrete wall, drinking in her gasp when I bit her lower lip. We broke apart, breathing hard, her forehead resting against mine. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know. You're going to get hurt, maybe." I traced the scar through her eyebrow with my thumb. "But some things are worth the risk." She kissed me again, softer this time, like she was memorizing the taste of me. "Take me home," I said against her lips. Her apartment was a studio in a building that had seen better decades, all exposed brick and secondhand furniture. But it was unmistakably Harper books stacked everywhere, a punching bag hanging in the corner, artwork that looked like it had been salvaged from dumpsters but somehow worked perfectly together. We barely made it through the door before she was pressing me against it, her mouth hot against my neck. I fumbled with the zipper of her jacket, desperate to feel more of her. "Skin, Kennedy." My name sounded different in her mouth, rougher and more real than I'd ever heard it. We stumbled toward the bed, shedding clothes like they were on fire. When she laid me down on the mattress, her touch was reverent, almost worshipful. "Are you sure?" she asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made my heart clench. Instead of answering, I pulled her down to me. The night dissolved into heat and sensation, Harper's hands mapping every inch of my body like she was trying to memorize me. When I cried out her name, she captured the sound with her mouth, and I thought I might die from how much I wanted her. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat slow. "The manuscript," she said into The darkness. The ending. I've been stuck on it for months. What's the problem? She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I don't know how to write about hope. All my stories end with the fight. I propped myself up on my elbow, studying her face in the dim light from the street lamp outside. Maybe that's because you've never had a reason to believe in happy endings. And now, I kissed her collarbone, tasting salt. Now you do. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in April, splashed across the front page of the literary section like a car crash. Underground fighter masquerades as author. Someone had recognized Harper from the warehouse fights and decided her story was worth selling to the highest bidder. The article was brutal, painting her as a fraud who'd used her violent lifestyle to manufacture authenticity. By noon, my father was in my office, Kennedy. He didn't sit down, just stood there in his perfectly tailored suit, radiating the kind of controlled fury that had terrified me as a child. Explain to me why our company name is associated with this person. Her name is Harper, and she's a brilliant writer. She's a common street fighter who's making us look like fools. He slapped a copy of the newspaper onto my desk. The board is concerned about our reputation. What board decision? His smile was cold. We're dropping the book, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. You can't do that. I can and I will. This company has a reputation to maintain. What about Harper's reputation? Her career? Should have thought of that before she decided to play prizefighter. He moved toward the door, then paused. And, Kennedy, I suggest you distance yourself from this situation, professionally and personally. He knew. Somehow he knew about us. After he left, I sat staring at the newspaper photo of Harper, grainy and unflattering, captured mid-punch in the warehouse ring. The caption called her violent and unstable. They didn't know her at all. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper, saw the paper. It's okay. I understand if you need to back out. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it and called her instead. Kennedy, she started. Pack a bag, I said. What? Pack a bag. You're staying with me until this blows. Over. I can't ask you to do that. Your reputation? Fuck my reputation. The word surprised us both. I'd never sworn at Harper before, never let my perfectly constructed facade crack quite so completely. Kennedy, they're trying to destroy you, I said, my voice shaking with anger I didn't know I possessed. And I won't let them. That night, she showed up at my penthouse apartment with a duffel bag and shadows under her eyes. I poured us both whiskey, the good stuff, older than Harper, and we sat on my couch, planning our next move. I could find another publisher, Harper said, staring into her glass. You could. I tucked my legs under me, studying her profile. Or we could fight. She looked at me sharply. We? I'm not letting them win. Your story matters, Harper. It deserves to be told. Even if it costs you everything. I thought about everything I'd built, everything I stood to lose. The company, my father's approval, my safe little world where nothing unexpected ever happened. Especially then, I set doubt the board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. I spent Wednesday night rewriting my presentation, crafting arguments about artistic integrity and diverse voices and the importance of authentic storytelling. Harper sat on my couch, watching me pace and rehearse. You know, this is crazy, right? She said when I finished my 15th run-through. Probably. They're not going to listen to you. Maybe not. She stood up, crossed to where I was standing. By the window overlooking the city. Why are you doing this? The answer should have been complicated. It should have been about justice and artistic integrity and all the noble things I'd been planning to say in the boardroom. Instead, I said, because I love you. It was the first time either of us had said it. The words hung in the air between us like a held breath. Harper's eyes went wide. Kennedy, I love you, I said again, stronger this time. I love your fierce heart and your terrible coffee and the way you see truth in everything. I love that you fight for what matters, and you matter. This story matters. She kissed me then, desperate and grateful and scared all at once. I love you too, she whispered against my lips. You crazy, beautiful disaster. The boardroom was full of gray suits and grayer attitudes. I stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, my presentation materials spread in front of me like battle plans. Gentlemen, I began, then paused to look pointedly at the two women in the room. And ladies, we have a choice to make. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out every argument I could think of. Market research showing readers hungry for authentic voices, sales figures from similar books that had performed beyond expectations, reviews from early readers praising Harper's raw honesty. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, board member James Crawford cleared his throat. Miss Phillips, while we appreciate your passion, for this project, the fact remains that this author has been revealed as a fraud. She's not a fraud, I said quietly. She pretended to be something she wasn't. No, she wrote about her life. The fact that her life is more complicated than you expected doesn't make her dishonest. My father leaned forward. Kennedy, the decision has been made. Then I respectfully submit my resignation. The words came out steadier than I felt. Around the table, faces showed varying degrees of shock and disapproval. You're making a mistake, my father said. I gathered my materials, hands surprisingly steady. The only mistake I've made is waiting this long to stand up for what I believe in. As I walked toward the door, I heard murmurs behind me, urgent. Whispers about succession plans and damage control. I didn't look back. Harper was waiting in the hallway outside, having somehow talked her way past security. When she saw my face, she knew. How bad? She asked. I'm unemployed. She winced. Kennedy, I'm so sorry. Don't. I took her hand, intertwining our fingers. Don't apologize for being worth fighting for. The book launch party was held at a small independent bookstore in Brooklyn, the kind of place where the shelves were crooked and the coffee was terrible, and everyone was there because they genuinely loved books. I stood at the back of the crowd, watching Harper read from chapter 7, the scene where her protagonist realizes that sometimes the most important fights happen outside the ring. She looked up from the page, scanning the audience until she found me. Her smile was soft and private, just for me. This book, she said, closing it carefully, is dedicated to the woman who taught me that some fights are worth losing. Because sometimes losing the fight means winning something better. After the formal reading, people milled around with wine and cheese, asking Harper to sign books and pose for photos. I hung back, content to watch her in her element. My father appeared at my elbow like a ghost from my former life. Kennedy. I turned, surprised. We hadn't spoken since the day I'd walked out of the boardroom. Dad. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. I bought the book. Oh. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, watching Harper laugh at something a reader had said. She's talented, he admitted grudgingly. She is. The company you've started, Redbird Press, he paused. It's doing well. We're surviving. Another pause. Then quietly, I'm proud of you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been waiting my whole life to hear them, and now they came when I least expected it. Thank you, I said, because I didn't trust myself to say anything else. He nodded once, then disappeared back into the crowd. I watched him go, feeling something settle in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Later, after the last book had been signed and the last question answered, Harper and I walked back to my apartment through streets glittering with late spring rain. Good turnout, I said. Better than I expected. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Your dad came. I saw. That must have been weird. Everything about this year has been weird. I stopped walking, pulling her into the shadow of a building. But good weird. The best weird. She kissed me under the streetlights, soft and sweet, and tasting like the champagne we'd shared at the party. Come on, she said against my lips. Let's go home. Home. When had my apartment become our apartment? When had her books started sharing shelf space with mine, her coffee mugs mixed in with my dishes? We climbed the stairs to the 5th floor, Harper's hand warm in mine. At the door, she stopped. I have something for you, she said. From her pocket, she pulled a key brass and slightly tarnished, attached to a keyring shaped like a small bird. What's this? Our new place. Bigger apartment, better neighborhood, space for both of us and all our books. I stared at the key, throat tight with emotion. Harper, I know it's fast, she said quickly, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I want to build something with you. Not just the publishing house, not just the career stuff. I want to build a life. The key was warm from her pocket, solid and real in my palm. No more fighting? I asked. She grinned, that sharp smile that had captivated me from the beginning. Well, no more fighting alone. I kissed her then, pouring months of love and fear and hope into the press of lips against lips. When we broke apart, both breathless, I pressed the key back into her hand. Keep it, I said. I'll get my own copy made. Her laugh was bright and clear and full of promise. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new apartment, watching. Harper made coffee that could probably power a small city. The morning light caught the ring on her finger, nothing fancy, just a simple silver band that matched mine. Mail's here, she called from the front door. Among the usual bills and catalogs was a package addressed to both of us, Kennedy Phillips and Harper Reeves, Redbird Press. Inside was a manuscript and a handwritten note from a teenager in Ohio. Dear Miss Phillips and Miss Reeves, I read Harper's book last month and it changed my life. I'm sending you my story because I think you might understand what it's like to fight for something that matters. Harper read over my shoulder, her chin resting on my head. She's good, Harper said softly. She is. We stood there in our sun-filled kitchen, surrounded by boxes of books and proof that we built something real together. Something that mattered. Harper turned in my arms, her hand settling at my waist. No regrets? I thought about the question. Seriously. I'd lost my family business, my father's approval, the safe life I'd planned. In return, I gained love and purpose, and the kind of happiness I hadn't even known I was missing. Just one, I said. Her smile faltered slightly. What's that? That it took me so long to find you. She kissed me then, coffee-flavored and perfect, and tasting like every morning for the rest of our lives. Outside our windows, the city hummed with 8 million stories waiting to be told. And inside our small apartment, surrounded by books and dreams and the woman who had taught me that the best stories begin when you stop playing it safe, I finally understood what Harper had been trying to tell me all along. Some fights are worth losing, because sometimes what you gain is so much better than what you were fighting for in the first place. The manuscript in my hands was warm with possibility, and Harper's laugh was bright with promise. And for the first time in my carefully planned life, I couldn't wait to see what happened next.